risks to children are only going to be increasing, and that's not only the risks of recruitment and being used in conflict, but the risks of attacks on schools, the risks of being victims of all sorts of violations that come along with the conflict that has spread across Myanmar.
Hello and welcome to What's Happening in Myanmar, a weekly show from the Frontier Myanmar podcast family. I'm your host, Luke Corbin. It's Thursday, July 3, and this is episode 34. A lot happened this week, with Thailand deporting hundreds of Myanmar migrants, some back and forth fighting only kilometres from Naung Chau, and the State Administration Council sentencing an Indonesian adventure tourist to 7 years in prison. Two guests will join us on the show momentarily. They are Shayna Bauchner, Asia researcher for Human Rights Watch, and Thiri, an independent researcher with the same organisation. They'll be talking us through the recent surge in the use of child soldiers by the Myanmar military in conflict zones and elsewhere on the ground. But before that, let's go into a little bit of detail with some of the recent news from the sky. First, timed to coincide with coup leader Senior General Min Aung Hlaing's visit to Belarus last week, activist group Justice for Myanmar alleged on Saturday that the Belarusian regime has been providing advanced military equipment to the Myanmar military since the 2021 coup. Justice for Myanmar cited leaked correspondence between Myanmar's Air Defence Command and Belarusian authorities confirming the deals, which included a major defence operational command system, radar technology, and ground-based missile systems. The group also alleged that Myanmar soldiers are being trained in Belarus in radioelectronic engineering. The military has improved its capacity to block and deploy drones since its disastrous losses in Operation 1027, and its increased reliance on drones and airstrikes has been detailed this week in a new publication by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. The link is in the show notes. Now, Min Aung Hlaing met Belarus dictator Alexander Lukashenko during his visit last week before flying on to the Russian Republic of Buryatia. Yes, another visit to Russia. But someone else was in Russia this week. The controversial current United Nations Special Envoy on Myanmar, Julie Bishop, visited Russia and posted a photo from a meeting with a Russian deputy foreign minister on Instagram. Bishop's remit is to work towards a peaceful and sustainable solution to the crisis in Myanmar, but there's been little tangible to show for it so far. And the second point of note this week is that just as this podcast was going to air, another Myanmar Air Force jet crashed, this time in Pasaung Township, Kayam or Karenni State. 2 men on board the plane died. The military claimed that the jet was downed due to bad weather or mechanical failure. But the Karenni Nationalities Defence Force says it shot the jet down with machine guns. This is the third Air Force jet to be destroyed this year due to the difficulty in sustaining armaments necessary for actually striking these fast-moving and high-flying aeroplanes. Resistance groups really celebrate these moments. Hey, thanks to the listeners who said they enjoyed the interview 2 weeks ago with Tom Keane and his role as a consultant for International Crisis Group. Frontier Myanmar actually released a Political Insider newsletter to members just this past Sunday that has more details on the characters and the methods involved in organising and contesting for power within the Bangladesh refugee camps. This is, of course, a complex context where the Myanmar military and some Bangladesh officials seem to have an interest in fostering militancy. So check your inbox if you're a Frontier member and join up if you're not. The People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, were the last group to claim credit for shooting down a military jet. If you recall, back on June 10, another jet crashed into a village, this time in Balai Township in Sagaing region, and the PLA was quick to say that they shot it down while it was attacking resistance forces that were besieging the Gandaun village police station, which was nearby. Subscribers to Frontier's media monitoring newsletters will have seen a translated Van Times story from June 25 about the seizure of that police station, which was successful on June 19. That story said that when the PLA seized the police station, they found a handful of adult military conscripts inside, as well as a 15-year-old boy who had been forcibly recruited to fight for the military from Yangon. He's now reportedly being well cared for. But he's far from the only youth being forced to fight in Myanmar. Human Rights Watch published a news release late last month saying the Myanmar military's capture and use of child soldiers has soared since the 2021 coup. As a Frontier feature covered earlier this year, the military has increasingly relied on aggressive conscription tactics, such as abducting young men and boys and detaining family members of missing conscripts to use as hostages. Human Rights Watch spoke out the day after the Office of the United Nations Secretary-General published its own report, saying that 482 children were recruited by Myanmar military forces and its allies last year. Of these children, 94 were recruited by the military, while 300 were jointly recruited by the military and their allied or proxy armed groups. The Secretary-General also said 262 children had been killed and nearly 1,000 were maimed in the same period. To talk us through this issue and the Human Rights Watch research and report in particular, I'm joined by two of the people involved in that. Shayna Bauchner and Thiri, welcome to What's Happening in Myanmar.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
It's a real pleasure to have both of you. I'll start by asking the first question to you, Shayna. This isn't a new thing. Minors and youths, kids have been victims and participants in Myanmar's wars for a very long time. And Myanmar has even been claimed by some measures to have had the most child soldiers of any country in the world at various times. But this recent Human Rights Watch release says that things have gotten even worse since the military started enforcing its People's Military Service Law, otherwise known as the conscription law. But that law stipulates the military can only conscript people aged over 18. So is the military flagrantly breaking its own conscription law? Not to mention its child rights law. That was legislated during the National League for Democracy term in 2019.
Yeah, so our research found that the Myanmar military's recruitment and use of child soldiers has surged not only since the coup, but also since late 2023 in response to the opposition's launch of Operation 1027. The military has faced increasing losses of not only territory, but troops. So to make up for those losses, it initiated this conscription drive, and we've seen children get recruited and used as soldiers as the military has been attempting to meet its conscription quotas that it put in place. This is a violation of not only the conscription law, but as you said, also the 2019 child rights law, which forbids the recruitment of anyone under 18.
Okay, and Thiri, is this flagrant? Is there any scrutiny within the regime or from outside it in Myanmar society?
So in terms of the policy per se, the military do not have a policy to recruit the children per se, but also at the same time, they do not scrutinize. They don't have any strict scrutinization because they will give the recruiter the quota of the number of recruit that they needed. They needed a month or something. So when people go and recruit, sometimes the children are included. And most children that are vulnerable are the children from the working children or the children from the vulnerable population, children running away from homes or children that are working late. So sometimes when they recruit it, when there are different form of recruiting, like adoption then, and so when they adopt the children on the street, they may not have any ID card and anything to prove. So our research found that also the media report also found that the children were given the fake ID with the falsified age. They would change it to 19 years old or something. So So this is a result of this aggressive recruitment, and also a lack of scrutinizing, and also a lack of accountability within the military structure itself when the children are recruited in their recruitment strategy.
Right, a lack of accountability. But is this done with total impunity in Myanmar society? Is there any recourse for parents and families? I mean, since conscripting minors is against the law.
In the Myanmar military, there's a procedure in place that if the parents of the children, they can go and with the necessary document that involve the birth certificate or the year that the children was enrolled in the school or other necessary document. So there are way to process it, but there's lots of challenges for that. First of all, like sometimes the children are adopted, like while they're working outside of their home from not even in their same town. So that sometimes the parents do not even know that children were adopted and like taken into the military. So they wouldn't be able to access to it. And two, the documentation in Myanmar, some people do not have the documentation, or like some children may not go to school. So they will not have any record about going to school. And also some children, some family member, because of their internal migration or the natural disasters, people may not have enough document to really go into it. Or sometimes the parents will be very scared of doing this. They may not know who to contact to, and people do not even know that they have rights to do that. So they say that you can do it, but very little chance for people to access to these mechanisms.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. It must be awful for these people. And what about the kids that they do go out into the institution, the military institution? Are there any patterns that you've managed to identify about where they go? Like the 15-year-old that I started this conversation with, he was recruited in Yangon, but he found himself sent to a police station hundreds of kilometers away, deep in a conflict zone in Sagaing region. Is that kind of thing typical?
So I have in my research, I have spoken to the people who was in the military, and they were sharing, and also the media report, the children themselves gave a media interview. So if they were known as children, and also if their body is small enough, they will be doing the cooking or guarding and carrying, like portering kind of thing. So it's more like mercenary purposes the children are used. But if the children are a bit bigger, the report said that they also have to they also was assigned to the operation as a combat. So even if they're not a combat, once they are the soldier, they have to carry their own weapons, and they have to carry the explosive on their arm. So it's very risky for them physically because they have to carry the explosive, and also because they are also holding guns. They are also became the combat. And so children are used in different places. But sometimes children have to carry more burden, because as an adult, they will be only fighting. But as a children, they will sometimes have to fight, but also they also have to do a lot of nitty-gritty job in the barrack or not in the front line.
Thanks, Thiri. Do you have anything to add there, Shayna?
Yeah, would just echo what Thiri said in terms of the jobs that children are being assigned to. We know that child soldiers that have been recruited are being sent to the same military trainings that are being held for adult recruits, and that some of them are being sent to the front lines where they've been found to be working as guides and porters, and that child soldiers have been found among captured groups of combatants or among groups of military defectors and escapees.
All right. I want to ask now, in a more cultural sense, do you know whether kids are just treated directly like adults in the military, or are they, like nourished in a different way? I mean, after all, a lot of these minors, they're still developing. They're not even as capable. They're not as capable even mentally, as an adult necessarily. So, did you hear anything about that? How does their role as a child change when they're in this institution?
I don't have any direct anecdotes. Based on what we've heard and people we've spoken to who were recruited alongside older child soldiers, so children who were 16 or 17, they were treated the same as adults in military training and on the battlefield. We know that some children who were 16 and 17 were given falsified documents saying they were 18, 19, and therefore were treated the same. But there have been child soldiers found as young as 12. And so in those situations with younger child soldiers, the assumption is there's different treatment in terms of the jobs that they are assigned to on the battlefield. I mean, this is something that the military has been doing for decades, and it has systems in place in terms of how it uses quite young child soldiers.
Yeah, and the Myanmar military also has, what's been described as a very hierarchical and quite abusive culture. Drugs are rampant, for example, especially on the front line, especially methamphetamine, and soldiers who've defected or have, fled the bases, gone AWOL, have got really appalling stories. This must be affecting children that are in the service as well.
Yeah. So with that, because in the training, because they are not considered as children, so they have to act like adults. And in some media interview, they were saying sometimes they trying to run away, and then if they were caught back, and then they were told that, okay, next time if you do this, and you will be punished this way and that way. There was some kind of media report about this. So in terms of the broader sense, even in our research, because we didn't get to meet with the child soldier directly, considering because of the limitation of this delegate subject. But in terms of the broader sense in the military, cultural-wise, there's always this kind of hierarchy of punishment, like the senior people, to be a senior, they have to punch or they have to quote unquote discipline to the newcomer. So they have been developing this kind of system to officially bully each other. So it's like that. And also the nutrition, a lot of soldiers do not get enough nutrition. They were sent out, they were not given any food or anything. They have to find their own food and all this. So children seems to have experienced that, but in our research we didn't hear that. But that doesn't mean that it may not exist.
Okay, and Thiri, you mentioned earlier how some children are particularly vulnerable to being abducted by the military, which you have to say is a predominantly Burma Buddhist institution. So I wonder whether child soldiers are the same. Do they reflect that? Are they mostly from the city or are they from the countryside?
So as far as I know, the children are more like suburban area. So like some children are from the tea shop. They work in the tea shop, and sometimes because they're young, they will go on the bicycle or the taxi, and then the taxi driver gonna sell them to the military. So that kind of cases. And most children are like, they're not with their family. So certain cases, the children's gonna go away, run away from home, or sometimes they're orphan. So they just wander around, and then the recruiter found them and then send them to the military compound. Or sometimes the children are hitchhiking to the military track, and then they were sold or they were recruited into the military. So more like children that are away from the family member, and children who are working outside of their home. And then one incident, there was this child, underage boy, he came home late after curfew hour, so he ran into this the security forces, and he was recruited. So that there are this kind of more vulnerable children, more in the suburban area. For the Myanmar military, in our research, not a lot of them are from the ethnic background. They are more Burma majority area, like the Nindai region or the Ayeyarwady region, Bago region, or Yangon region around them. But the military aligns some ethnic alliance groups of military. They may be more of the recruitment of the ethnic young children.
All right. Now, one for you, Shayna, about the SAC. Has the SEC made any statements about this issue since the coup? Does it admit the increase? Does it bother to respond to any allegations from the United Nations, other organizations, other countries?
Yeah, I mean, so the military in 2012 signed this action plan with the UN to end the recruitment and use of children, which in theory is still in place and is something that since the coup, the junta has referred to and has made claims about numbers of child soldiers who have been released since the plan was signed. In March this year, there was an announcement of a handful of people who had been recruited as children who were released. Obviously, this sort of revolving door of supposed releases while new children are being recruited makes these statements and claims ring fairly hollow, in line with releases of prisoners that the junta likes to carry out as something of a PR measure.
Right, public relations. Well, this problem, it's been going on for so long, even though it's getting worse recently. It's continued even with all the signings, protocols, and the new laws over the last, say, 15 years. It seems the SSE is just as impervious to pressure as its predecessor military regimes, the State Peace and Development Council, etc. So from your perspective, what can be done about this? Outside Myanmar, inside Myanmar, apart from, of course, holding the military to account with this kind of good research and supporting survivors?
I mean, one thing I'd say, the UN's report that came out last month includes a list at the end of actors that are committing grave violations against children. And there's 5 grave violations that they list. And the Myanmar military is the only state actor that's listed for committing all 5 of those violations. And so it really stands alone in terms of how dangerous a place Myanmar is for children. There obviously are challenges that concerned governments have in terms of putting pressure on the Myanmar military and the level that it can seek when it comes to leverage, to pushing for change. But there are governments, we can look to ASEAN and other actors who have some influence over the junta, to be pushing for them to end these grave violations against children, the crimes that are being carried out against children, not only recruitment, use of child soldiers, but killing of children, attacks on schools, abductions of children, sexual violence against children. These are absolutely appalling abuses that should not be happening in the world today and should be getting more focus and attention from the international community, from Myanmar's neighbors, from governments that have any types of levers of pressure over the junta. In terms of actions within the country, there is more that can be done for donors to be working with local groups to help them provide support for child victims of all of the Myanmar military's abuses.
For me, I'm more focusing on the children that are recruited. There are 2 things. One is the rehabilitation for the specific needs for the children, because right now a lot of the psychosocial support and other support, they are in place, but there's no specific to the children defected from the military or the child soldier. So that is one rehabilitation that needs to be specified for them. And the other thing is the concern raised by the defector groups is that there's overlapping effort of documentation, overlapping interviewing the children without having any necessary support to them, like the accommodating. So it's to avoid this re-traumatizing to the children. So kind of I think the documentation effort for these vulnerable populations should be more systematic and should be more coordinated in a manner to also protect the children and also to protect the children from being suffer from the secondary trauma. So also related to that, when I did the research, it was difficult to talk to the children soldier, but then, but I could have an access to the children that has been repeatedly interviewed by a lot of other people. So for the to keep the do no harm principle, we intentionally seek not to directly talk to them because we do not want to re-traumatize with the overlapping documentation.
Thank you. Thank you both. Now, coming up to finish, it's also important to note that the UN report said that many resistance groups also use child soldiers. They gave some numbers for last year: 34 by the Kachin Independence Army, 15 by People's Defence Forces, 12 by the Arakan Army, etc. This is, of course, just the verified numbers. Understanding the youths that serve in these armed groups that fight the Myanmar military is a little bit more nuanced, I would say, in the media and in research. But still, many would recognise that, children serving in conflict anywhere is illegal and awful, and all children should be safe from the effects of conflict. So I want to ask, do you see any difference between children serving in the Myanmar military and those in resistance armed groups, which also have political wings that govern and educate, hundreds of thousands of children? And what can be done to stop resistance groups from recruiting or allowing minors to serve? How can passionate teenagers be persuaded not to fight?
I think if there's more entry points in terms of engagement with non-state armed groups that can be accessed around education on the risks of child soldier recruitment and use, those should definitely be pursued. The UN report did find cases of child recruitment by these various non-state armed groups, but the vast majority of grave violations that were committed were carried out by the military and aligned forces. I think the UN found that around 80% of the grave violations that it verified were carried out by the military.
Yes, that is important. That's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, the nature of this is different from the military because there are a lot of children in the fighting alongside in the resistance group, especially in Middle Burma, where we have found out that over there is more like people have to resist again. So like the children, they're not child soldier, they're more like children combat. So they will be fighter today, like because the whole village have to fight against the military, and the next day they will be the children. So the situation is quite nuanced. It's also widespread. So it is also important to understand the nature of the children in the warfare. But in any case, they are children. Like nobody should be using the children, even if it is children themselves volunteering to be the combat, which is mostly the case in the resistant fighter. But even so, they are children. They are not physically and mentally prepared to be in the fighting. So every actor should be refrain themselves from recruiting children in their fighting alongside with them, even if it is a voluntary from the children themselves or from their family members.
Thanks, that's great. Okay. Now, thinking about the future, is this an only increasing trend, child soldier use since 1027, since the coup? Or is it possible that the numbers of recruits are peaking because of conscription? And if conscription slows down with the proposed election, maybe so could child recruitment. Is this a spike or is this only getting worse?
I think given what we've seen in terms of the trends, the risks to children are only going to be increasing, and that's not only the risks of recruitment and being used in conflict, but the risks of attacks on schools, the risks of being victims of all sorts of violations that come along with the conflict that has spread across Myanmar. Before the coup, the UN had documented recruitment and use in 4 states and regions, and since the coup, it's spread to all 14 states and regions. So as the conflict continues, I think we can expect to see these sorts of abusive practices continue to be carried out.
Yeah, well, I think everybody involved agrees that we need a speedy end to that conflict. The UN report and your Human Rights Watch news release are linked in the show notes to this episode. Thanks to you both for dialing in and talking about this. It's a really important and very sad topic. So thanks for joining again today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
As our guests depart, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for keeping up with what's happening in Myanmar. Don't forget you can email us, whimyanmar@proton.me, and we love to hear from you. And since you've listened to the very end, I know that you're a fan of little wireless programs like this one. So I've got to ask, did you know that Frontier Myanmar actually has another podcast? It's called Do Atan, which means Our Voice in Burmese, and it's a human rights-focused show, which is supported by a foundation Hirondelle. The latest episode this week is about the LGBT warriors resisting the military junta. Out, proud, and fighting. The episode's in English and in Burmese, and you can get it on all the podcast apps. Until next week, farewell and take care.